Good morning, Mr. President. I hope you had a good meeting prior to this meeting. What me and my team is doing here today is that we want to present you a request for the official apology for Operation Ranch Hand that was executed during the Vietnam War. A quick reminder for you, sir. Our president, John F. Kennedy, allowed the commencement of the Operation Ranch Hand in 1961 with the sole objective of eliminating the food supplies of the Viet Cong forces and also to kill the trees that served as cover, shelter, and protection for the Viet Cong forces. Ending in 1971, Operation Ranch Hand was one of the deadliest initiatives that took place in Vietnam War, causing up to millions of dollars in casualties and still has a long-lasting effect nowadays. Operation Ranch Hand was a military initiative that flew C-123 airplanes over the forest of Vietnam to release herbicides to subdue the Viet Cong forces. The herbicide that was used is called dichlorfluoric phenolcytic acid with a more widely known name such as Agent Orange. The intended purpose of the herbicide was to cause plants to grow uncontrollably, and after a certain amount of time, the plant itself will decay and deteriorate and die, which makes the Viet Cong forces vulnerable as their base are shown to the American forces. However, the intentions of wiping out only the tree and the plants has backfired, as the army didn't realize that it affects human health as well. All these herbicides come into human contact, and gradually people develop diseases such as Parkinson, cancer, and then even worse, the descendants of the future generations were born with body deformities, major ones. Operation Ranch Hand was considered the last initiative that was classified as chemical warfare in the 20th century. Something that Americans don't see is what Agent Orange can do to the body. American veterans, whereas they could work in the planes, they could work in the hospitals, or they could work at the demilitarized zone that were in contact with Agent Orange, has to deal with most likely cancer or diabetes. However, the next generation of Vietnamese descendants with parents that was affiliated with Agent Orange has a lifespan of only around 20 years and major body deformities. Here is an example of the body deformity. Which then brings up the question, how are these victims doing nowadays? American victims, or mostly American veterans, are given three benefits if they're in contact with Agent Orange or suspects that they do. They're given health care, a compensation pay, and or an Agent Orange registry health exam, all of which can be found on the Veterans Affairs website. However, Vietnamese victims aren't as fortunate. More often than not, parents of the victims of Agent Orange abandon their children to the orphanages because they simply cannot afford the amount of money for healthcare that comes with their children, or some even more rarer cases, the parents of these victims die. Consequently, these orphanages take care of these children. However, with limited funding and decades-old facilities, the victims of Agent Orange has to live in below-par facilities that should be in no shape be for them, considering their circumstances. Not to mention, these facilities lack social workers and often needs to be funded from pagodas, churches, and other religious establishments to have the chance to even survive. They have a mild reliance on charities and volunteers to even exist. Our government has spent over $180 million for Americans to treat their Agent Orange diagnosis, while we only allocated the Vietnamese citizen only $20 million back in 1980, which little proceeds has went into health treatment. And for the past 50 years, nothing has been done by our government since, which brings me and my team here with an objective and a goal. We here think that you should initiate an apology campaign for the action taken against the Vietnamese people during Operation Ranch Hand. We here have laid out a plan of what you should do to apologize to the Vietnamese population as effectively as possible. First plan of action. You should start the funding for the Vietnamese government to handle any Agent Orange affiliated associations or facilities. Our media has had a relatively negative impression on the world, where our words come much quicker than our actions, and that we don't back up our words or promises. After all the funds has been allocated, we think you should have an official statement with the Vietnamese government to finalize the transaction publicly. After these actions are carried out, future plans will be entailed. These are the things that we believe the Vietnamese government needs funding for regarding Agent Orange. Fund new facilities and treatment for the Vietnamese government by the means of renovating or rebuilding these orphanages, supplying more materials and healthcare workers to increase the living standards of the victims and treat them the best as possible. Their money is scarce. There will be a point where volunteers and charities will be limited. By funding them, not only we are bettering their lives, we are lifting a weight off their shoulders. Vietnam has also been affected by the environmental effects of the herbicide, contamination zones, and destroyed ecosystems. The damage is massively underreported. They, as a government, has gradually cleaned up most of the remnants, but us, as the culprit of the situation, should take over the rest of the cleaning up. This campaign in specific should last for an estimate of 12 months, as it will show the Vietnamese citizen that us as a nation, the United States, has changed morally and willing to take actions for it. And by having a campaign that runs for over a year, it signifies our commitment to the cause. After we have finished our campaign, an official statement shall be presented to the Vietnamese public with the presence of you, sir, the President of the United States, the Vietnamese Prime Minister, major Agent Orange charity executives, and any other social workers that is affiliated with the cause. You should then mention in your public speech the effects it has on Vietnamese society, recognizing their distress over the years and apologizing for the cause of distress, and mentioning the measures already taken to right your wrongs. By having an official statement in public, it highlights the good that we have done as a country, raises public attention for these organizations and orphanages so they would get future help and funding if possible, and it acts as a building block in the relationship of the United States and Vietnam. In the long run, to show and demonstrate our change and care for the cause, further actions will be taken. Consistent and hopefully annual fundings will be allocated to these organizations to help them improve living standards gradually. Social workers will be sent and allocated to the Red Cross or any organizations that deem it necessary for it. And to prove that there is a change, curriculums in the United States will be altered to reveal the truth and the results of the actions that were taken by the United States military during the war. By doing this, we are telling the Vietnamese people that we know our wrongs, we are trying to reconcile it, and actions are being taken. And this is a point of statement for you, Mr. President. If any American citizens wish to challenge your decision upon this, we predict that a major argument that American citizens might make is that how would it be possible to allocate fundings for an overseas country, as our country ourselves might have issues funding ourselves? Well, our argument to that is Operation Ranch Hand was a military initiative that costed millions and millions of dollars. Not to mention, the money used to cover up and treat people for what has happened. So if the money used for funding wars and initiatives like this were used to further the cost of funding charities, organizations, and reconciliation, then the initiatives like Operation Ranch Hand wouldn't even occur in the first place, saving us millions and millions in dollars, and maybe even more importantly, a peaceful night of sleep. Thank you, Mr. President, and I hope you allow my plans to go ahead. Have a nice day.